Spooky gang, what's happening? Your boy Tech is back, and not only am I back, but we are back with some more underrated movies that every horror fan must watch. So without further ado, if you are new to the channel, go ahead subscribe so you can join the Spooky gang, like the video, and we'll get this thing started right now. So, talking about underrated horror movies. One, there's plenty of underrated horror movies that really don't get the notoriety and the honor that they deserve. Some of them are a little older horror movies, and some are honestly more recent ones. Like, I've talked numerous times about how over the past 5 years, horror has been really amazing. So I wanted to give you guys 5 more horror movies that I feel are very underrated and that every horror movie fan should watch. Before I get that started, y'all comment down below, what do you think are some of the most underrated horror movies in the genre? And what did you think about these particular horror movies that we're about to cover in this video? So to kick things off, starting with our first underrated horror movie that we'll be talking about, which is Strange Darling. Strange Darling came out in 2024, and it is easily one of the best horror movies of 2024. Strange Darling is one of those movies where it's like, after further thought of, me creating a sort of my top 5 best horror movies from 2024, this really probably should have been one of those movies that made that list. Even with as many great horror movies as we got last year, I think that this deserves to be in that top 5 spot. For people who aren't familiar with this movie is a thriller / horror movie that is directed by J.T. Molnar and is featuring Willa Fitzgerald and my boy Kyle Gallner. One thing I'll say about this movie is these two were amazing in the movie. They were really good. Kyle Gallner is already becoming one of my favorite horror actors, and then when you pair him and Willa Fitzgerald together, it just made for a really great movie. And what makes Strange Darling special to me is the fact that it's shot in a non-linear way. The film sort of unfolds in 6 out of order chapters, so it's that case where it might start with chapter 4, then it'll jump to chapter 2, chapter 5, and then go back to chapter 1, so then you get sort of a background on everything, and then that helps lead you to chapter 6. Like, it bounces around in a timeline, which sort of gives it this nice little stylistic approach. Like, I really love the way that this movie is shot on 35mm film, so like that gives it that extra layer of that stylistic and aesthetic approach to the way the film was directed. Like, it really feels very Tarantino-esque, and that's something that I genuinely appreciate about it. Tons of suspense and different challenges on various tropes, whether we're talking about traditional gender roles or victimization themes, and overall a very nice perspective on like this nice cat and mouse game. And then what makes it great is it kind of feels like as soon as you think that one person is sort of crazier than the other, it kind of shows you that it's like they kind of one up each other the entire movie for being basically crazy. And it's just a really great movie. Don't want to spoil just about like every single aspect that happened to the movie, because I still think the movie is relatively fresh and I think a lot of people still haven't seen it. So if you have not seen it, go ahead, check that movie out. It is definitely a very good movie, and your boy Tech for sure puts his stamp on it. The next movie that I wanted to talk about, and this is going back a little bit all the way to 2007, and that is James Wan's Dead Silence. Dead Silence is one of James Wan's, first big budget films outside of Saw. For the decade of the 2000s, it is for sure one of the better horror movies. And essentially the movie Dead Silence follows a man investigating the mysterious murder of his wife, which seems to be connected to the legend of Mary Shaw, a vengeful ventriloquist. So throughout this whole movie, he's dealing with this whole Mary Shaw curse and trying to figure this whole thing out. And all the while, you have multiple scenes with just these creepy dolls that she has. And it's kind of, in a way, it's like a more adult, scarier version of like Goosebumps Slappy. And I know all of y'all remember that from back in the day, but like it's just a really good movie with really great atmosphere, and it feels so dark and mysterious and just very eerie in a lot of scenes. And the main doll that's creepy is the one that's called Billy. It has a really good twist ending, which makes the movie just that much better. It's just overall encompassing, this is just a fantastic movie. Also giving writing credits to Leigh Whannell. Him and James Wan have been like dang near a perfect duo pretty much forever. So from the Saw movies to this, to The Conjuring, to Insidious, to whatever you name, those two have worked together. And even in some of the films that they work separate, even a lot of those are still very good as well. So it's like, this movie is just like one of those ones that you can't pass. So if you like movies like Insidious and The Conjuring and Malignant and all of James Wan's work, if you haven't seen some of his earlier films like Dead Silence, then it's like pretty much the perfect movie to watch. But the one thing that I will say that I will rag on a little bit is still that early 2000s stylistic approach of how they use like a tint for almost every movie. So like even with James Wan specifically, if you look at Saw, it had that green tint pretty much like the whole movie. In this movie, it has this little weird blue tint. You know, like Texas Chainsaw is not a James Wan film, but Texas Chainsaw had like a sepia tone. Like I don't know why films used to do that in the 2000s. So that's one thing that I don't think necessarily aged as well for 2000s films, but that doesn't take away from the story that you get, the scares that you get, the vibes, everything. So Dead Silence for sure is a movie that I recommend, and I think that it is extremely underrated. The next movie that I wanted to talk about is another movie that came out last year, which is Speak No Evil. Speak No Evil also is a very, very, very good movie that sort of fell under the radar for a lot of people as well, similarly to Strange Darling. And yeah, it's just a generally good movie. It's pretty much good all around. There isn't really anything that's just fantastic about it outside of one aspect. So it does have one elite trait, so I'll somewhat give it that. But it's just like pretty much good all around on all bases. And the one elite trait that it has, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you know where I'm going for the people who have seen it, which is James McAvoy's performance is just James McAvoy. He doesn't get talked about enough for his range and his acting ability. You know, from looking back to a movie like Split to this movie, it's just his ability to like portray emotion and confliction and just like that serious kind of like mental illness, like the mental mind games that it seems like he's playing. But I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain. Like he's just a fantastic actor, and he's sort of what helps drive this film home even further. And so talking about this movie storyline wise, it follows a Danish family invited to spend a weekend with a seemingly friendly Dutch couple, only for the trip to take a disturbing turn. So once again, mentioning like unsettling atmosphere, this movie pretty much has all of it, because you see how wild James McAvoy's character and his wife and, you know, that his little family, how awkward and like unsettling that they are, you know, some of the things that they do. And, you know, like from the aspect of like James McAvoy's wife correcting the family's daughter, and it's just like, you know, anybody knows that you don't ever, you know, try to correct somebody else's child. Like that's something that you don't do. Little things like that, and then they sort of just build up and build up and build up, and then you see little levels of abuse, and you just see this real gradual psychological manipulation. Like James McAvoy is able to convince the father character of a lot of situations where, you know, the father character's wife is just like, nah, I'm not really feeling any of this. But, you know, a lot of times he's still going with it. But awkward situations that the family gets put in through all these and some of the intentions of the Dutch couple, it just kind of ultimately leads up to this. But yeah, it's just like different themes that it goes over is like, you know, the results of having like extreme kindness and politeness, and showing how like if you ignore some of those red flags out of kindness of your heart, then it can sort of really put you in some really jacked up situations. So overall, really good movie. Just like I said, solid all around. You really can't beat it. And I think it's one of those horror movies that should be mentioned a little more often when we're talking about some of the better horror movies, especially for last year. The next horror movie that I wanted to talk about is Watcher. Watcher came out just a few years ago, and the movie follows Julia, played by Micah Monroe, is an American woman who moves to a foreign country with her husband and becomes convinced that a mysterious man is stalking her. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure the person who is presumed to be the stalker in the movie is the guy who led the rebellion at Craster's Keep in Game of Thrones. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's it. So all of my Game of Thrones people, y'all know what I'm talking about. But in this movie, what makes this movie good is like this element of isolation and paranoia. Even though Julia, Micah Monroe's character, is moving to this country with her husband, but it's still the fact that it seems like he is always gone, and, you know, oh, I'm working late tonight, or he's always at work or always at doing something. So all you see for the most part is her in that apartment, seeing that somebody is staring out their window only at certain times of the day / night. And it really is unsettling in a lot of ways. And then you sort of see that confliction that Micah Monroe is having in the movie, because she's sitting there trying to tell her husband, like, hey, like there's this guy that's always watching me across the street. And, you know, even when I'm out in public and stuff like that, I sort of feel this presence of somebody following me, somebody watching me. Like the movie theater scene where he sits right behind her and stuff like that just really makes you feel uncomfortable. And yet, no matter who she tells, it always seems like nobody ever believes her. It even comes to a point where like you can see all the gaslighting, and then the level of self-doubt that she starts to have because of all of this. Pretty much all of that builds up to a very terrifying finale where she ends up coming face to face with the stalker, which is really good. So this film has a lot of things going for it, and of course, for the most part, I love a lot of things that Micah Monroe is in, so she's good. Some of the other supporting cast, they were pretty solid, especially like her neighbor friend. There's some nice little characters. Just overall, I think that this is like I said, one of those underrated movies. If you're wanting more of like that psychological thriller that's not overly horror, but it has some of those elements in it, then I think Watcher is like one of those perfect ones, especially if isolation and being alone is one of those things that can be a little unnerving to you. And the last horror movie that I wanted to talk about for being very underrated and it being a movie that everybody should watch, which is Heretic. Heretic really caught me by surprise and ended up for sure also being one of the better horror movies of 2024. So just for a little bit of a plot overview, the film follows two young Mormon missionaries, Sister Barnes, that's played by Sophie Thatcher, and Sister Paxton, which is played by Chloe East, who visit the home of Mr. Reed, played by Hugh Grant, with intentions to convert him, only to find themselves ensnared in a dangerous game. Once again, talking about performances, Sophie Thatcher is also one of those people that's starting to become one of my favorites. She was really good in Companion, and she was really good in this too. The person who really made this movie go was Hugh Grant. Hugh Grant pretty much crushed this role. He really made the movie feel very chilling due to his manipulation and his challenging of the missionaries and their faith. That's pretty much what the movie is geared around altogether, is they're coming there to convert him. Little do they know, he's one of those people who is like, quote unquote, study all of the religions and all of this good stuff. He knows all the background. So throughout this little game that he's playing with them, it's almost in a way that he's trying to get them to challenge their own faith and break some of their morals, because they end up being trapped in the house with them. It was kind of obvious that they were going to end up being trapped in the house, so I don't know why they decided to come in, but whatever. But yeah, like I said, it really does challenge you, on the foundations of your convictions and how you feel about certain aspects of life, especially when regarding religion and belief. Like I said, I think that it posed some really great questions. And then seeing how the two missionaries have to navigate that and then still stay strong within their faith, and while trying to figure out how to exit this home with all of these mind games that this guy is playing, like it just really makes for also another, psychological thriller movie, but with a little bit of paranormal aspects, a little bit here and there, nothing too crazy. So just a very solid movie. Also another one that I'm gonna put my stamp on, just because, it's not necessarily a movie that I'm gonna rewatch a whole lot, but for a one-time watch, I think I 100% recommend it. It just has too many good elements of suspense and that psychological aspect of faith and manipulation that just really helped drive the movie home, along with Hugh Grant's performance. It just, all that is a perfect culmination for a very, very, very solid movie. And it for sure is already one of the most underrated horror movies in the genre, and it's only been out for roughly maybe a year. That is all I have, Spooky Gang. Y'all comment down below, what are some of your favorite underrated horror movies? And what did you think about these particular underrated horror movies? Can't lie to y'all, man. It feels really good to be back. My vacation was really good. It was really a staycation. All I did was chill pretty much the whole time. Y'all already know the vibes and watch movies. But it was really good, really refreshing. So, we back on the grind. I missed you guys. I love you guys. I appreciate all the love and support that I continually get. We're growing this community together. So, I'm going to keep dropping these bangers for y'all. But that is all I have, Spooky Gang. So until next time, y'all stay blessed. And y'all stay spooky.